Villains is the seventh studio album by American alternative rock band Queens of the Stone Age. Released on August 25th, 2017, the album sees the band reinventing their sound once again. Many fans and critics alike describe the album as a bit more laid back compared to what they did in the past. Rolling Stone journalist Kory Grow described the album as, quote, a little bit looser and more up-tempo, end quote, compared to the previous album, Like Clockwork. The band released 2 singles from the album, The Way You Used to Do and The Evil Has Landed. The 2 singles were quite a contrast to each other. One was a 50s dance and swing inspired song, while the other was a more traditionally sounding Queen's track that had already existed for 14 years before the release. Now, since it's almost 2 years since the album's release, I thought it would be a great idea to look back at the history, lyrics, and the sound of this album to see what it was all about. So this is a brief introduction to Villains. Feet Don't Fail Me Now is the first song off of Villains. Surprisingly enough, it could have been a song featured on Post-Pop Depression, the album Josh, Dean Fertitta, and Matt Helders made together with Iggy Pop a year before. But since the song wasn't completely finished, they used it as a warm-up song before their shows. And then it found its place onto the new Queens album. As Josh Homme said in an interview with WDR1 Live after the album's release, quote, Iggy first wrote the phrase, "Feet don't fail me now," end quote. Personally, I think it would have been really interesting to hear Iggy Pop's vocals on that track. Technically speaking, it still would have been a Queen song, but with Iggy as a featured guest. Now, this isn't the only interesting fact about this song though. Feet Don't Fail Me Now features the longest intro that the band ever made. And about that, Josh commented, quote, the point is to get you to look left, and to believe that the song is going this way, just so that it can come from behind and then hit you from over here, you know? End quote. The song definitely has that effect on the listener. It builds up to this climax and transfers you from this eerie and tense musical section into something that punches you in the face and makes you want to jump around. The song was inspired by Lakota Sioux Pow Pow music, and honestly, when I heard that myself, I had no idea what Josh Homme was talking about, but it's basically a form of music made by indigenous tribes of North America. Now, there were a lot of mixed feelings about having Mark Ronson on as a producer this time around. Although he's been a fan of rock music, and Queens of the Stone Age in particular, for a long time, he's been more connected and associated with pop music in previous years, since he's worked with artists like Amy Winehouse, Lady Gaga, Bruno Mars, and others. So naturally, a lot of fans were questioning if this was a good fit. But in an interview with BBC Newsbeat, Homme was quick to explain how positively their collaboration had affected the creative process. Quote, the whip only cracks on one end, and I usually hold the handle. It was great to be able to go and pass the handle around because I wanted to play guitar and sing. End quote. Later on in that interview, he emphasized that thought even more, about how Ronson worked as a leader for the project. He was able to put the band into action, come with criticism without being rude, and was able to bring in some original ideas that otherwise wouldn't be there. Quote, he was just another member, but with great musical brain. End quote. More about the recording process, frontman Josh Homme mentioned in various interviews how the band sometimes preferred recording without a click track. If you're a complete stranger to recording lingo, that basically means that they play without a metronome. So some of the tracks might change tempo as the song goes on. A lot of musicians prefer this because it gives the music a more organic feel. The tempo ebbs and flows instead of being on the exact same beats per minute throughout the whole song, which sometimes can sound a little bit more mechanical. Quote, sometimes the click restrains the energy. It's like you're free to do what you want inside this box. It's not really freedom at all, it's sort of a diversion. End quote. Although the band has utilized synths in the past, they put a lot more time and focus into utilizing it on this album in particular. Hami commented in that same interview that I just quoted that he had been watching a lot of John Carpenter movies. Carpenter famously made the music for all of his movies himself. His music is very characteristic for using these gritty and ominous sounding synths, something Josh took a liking to. Now, since we're already on the topic of talking about what the band did in the studio, Boneface was always spending time with the band when they were recording stuff for the record. Boneface is the cover name for the visual artist who created the artwork for the album, and he's also created artwork for their previous album, Like Clockwork, and is therefore the first artist to have stayed on board with the band for 2 album cycles. He put a lot of work into this album, as the deluxe version contains 20 to 30 prints. I don't have the deluxe version myself, but apparently you get everything from stickers and posters to trading cards and other stuff. It's a lot of fun. I mean, I really wish I could have bought that deluxe version when it was first out. Now, there's a few values that Josh has followed for many years that has definitely come to shape this record. And there's 3 things in particular that he talks about: honesty, fear, and risk-taking. With the music, Josh wants to express himself honestly and freely. He especially wants to say things he's afraid to say, and if that thing spontaneously comes out of him, then it can create this moment of beauty. About this, and about creating the record, Hami said, quote, "If I can find a way to be really honest, and especially if it feels scary, that's the right direction. In the last couple of years especially, I've always been obsessed with now, knowing that that's all you ever get." End quote. Now, if we move away from the recording history and take a closer look at the lyrics, we find a continuation in the lyrical style from their previous album. Like Clockwork was an album where Hami brought some very dark and personal topics into view. Songs like The Vampire of Time and Memory and I Appear Missing featured lyrics that cut deeply into a near-death experience that Hami had during a knee surgery. His heart stopped beating, but the hospital personnel managed to get him back to life. But after waking up, he couldn't hear music in his head anymore. He felt like he'd lost a part of himself. This experience led him to write lyrics that were even more truthful and closer to his heart with this new album, Villains. Feet Don't Fail Me is a song about moving on and chasing your inner calling despite hardships. The Way You Used to Do is about the times Hami first fell in love with his wife, Brody Dale, while Fortress is a song dedicated as a message to his daughter. The overall message of that song being that he will be there for her during tough times. About the personal nature of the lyrics, Josh said, quote, "I think as you go on in your career, records become more about expressing who you are. They're almost like markers on a timeline of being alive." End quote. Although some of the subject matter on this record was as dark as the stuff on Like Clockwork, the sound was noticeably more up-tempo and danceable. Many of the songs are more beat-centric, with bass and drums often being the shining elements of the songs. The influence of beats, pop music, 50s swing music, and good old hard rock makes this record quite outstanding. Despite of introducing a lot of new sounds, some of the riffs on this album were made a long time before they started to work on the record. The Way You Used to Do, for example, was a song that Josh made the riff for back in 2013. According to a Rolling Stone article, the riff for A Head Like a Haunted House had existed since 2007, while even more impressively, the Evil Has Landed riff dated as far back as 2002, which explains why it sounds like the most classic Queen song on this record, at least to my ears. As a result, there's both something very fresh and something old-fashioned to be found on this record, something for both new and old listeners to embrace. Now, there's so much more I could have talked about regarding this album, but that's it for this video.
thank you so much for watching. I just wanted to let you know that I'm hosting this free web training where I share with you the 3 secrets that will take you from a guitar rut to becoming an experienced guitarist in just 7 days. So if you're looking to have a lot more fun, just save a lot of time during your guitar practice, and also just transform into a better guitar player, then make sure you click the link in the description below to sign up for that free web class. I'll see you on the other side.